In the peaceful valleys of Wyoming, where the sky stretched wider than the heart could imagine, there lived a cowboy named Luke Carter. He wasn't famous nor rich, but everyone who knew him would say the same thing: he was a man of quiet strength. Luke was the kind of man who spoke less and worked more. His life revolved around the land his father left him, a small ranch surrounded by endless grass and open air. Every morning before sunrise, Luke would walk out to the barn, boots crunching against the dirt, his hat pulled low. The horses would greet him with soft snorts, and the sound of their hooves echoing against the wooden floor always made him smile. He talked to them as if they were friends. In truth, they were his best friends. The ranch had been his whole world since his parents passed away years ago. He lived a quiet life, simple and steady. But sometimes, when the night was too still and the stars were too bright, Luke would feel a small ache in his chest, a feeling that something was missing. He didn't know what it was, but he hoped someday he'd find it. One warm evening, as the sun began to sink behind the hills, a truck came rolling down the dusty road. It stopped by Luke's ranch gate, its engine coughing and hissing before it finally went quiet. Luke watched from the porch as 4 people stepped out, city folks clearly. Their clothes were too neat, their shoes too clean for ranch land. The oldest man waved at Luke and explained that their truck had broken down. They were on their way to a small town nearby but needed a place to stay until help arrived. Luke nodded kindly. "You can stay in the old cabin near the barn," he said. "It's small, but it'll keep you warm." Among the group was a young woman named Emily. She looked to be in her early 20s, quiet, polite, and a little shy. Her hair was tied back in a simple braid, and her eyes held a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. She thanked Luke softly, barely meeting his gaze. That night, while the others talked and laughed inside the cabin, Emily stepped outside. She was drawn to the sound of horses. Under the silver moonlight, she saw Luke brushing down a brown mare, his movements calm and sure. For a while, she simply watched him work. There was something peaceful about the way he moved, as if the whole world had slowed down around him. When Luke finally noticed her, he gave a small nod. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "I'm not used to the quiet," she admitted. "The city never sleeps," Luke smiled faintly. "Out here, quiet's the best sound you'll ever hear." They talked for a few minutes, nothing deep, just small words about the land, the stars, and how the wind always carried a story of its own. Before she went back inside, Luke said, "If you're still here in the morning, I'll show you something worth waking up for." The next morning, Emily found him waiting near the barn. He was already saddling a horse, his hat pulled low against the rising sun. She hesitated but walked toward him. "What did you want to show me?" she asked. Luke pointed to the mare. "Ever ridden before?" Emily shook her head quickly. "No, never." "Then it's about time," Luke said with a soft grin. "Don't worry, I'll be right here." At first, Emily refused. She said she was afraid of falling, afraid of hurting the horse, afraid of, well, everything. Luke only chuckled. "No one learns by standing still," he said gently. "You just need to trust yourself. And a little bit of me." After a long pause, she agreed. Luke helped her step up, his hands steady, his voice calm. She sat awkwardly on the saddle, clutching the reins too tight. The horse snorted softly, sensing her fear. "Easy," Luke said quietly. "Take a deep breath. Horses can feel what's inside you. If you're scared, they'll be scared too." Emily did as he said, slowly breathing in the morning air. It smelled like fresh hay and sunlight. Luke stood beside the horse, his hand resting gently on its neck, guiding her every movement. Minutes passed. Her hand stopped trembling. The horse began to walk in slow circles, and Emily started to smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. The wind brushed her face, and the world seemed to open up before her. Luke watched quietly, the corners of his mouth lifting. When she finally managed to ride a few steps without his help, she laughed, a soft, genuine laugh that filled the barnyard. Luke smiled wider, tipping his hat. "See? Told you the quiet can be a friend." By the time the sun climbed high, Emily was exhausted but happy. She climbed down from the horse, cheeks flushed with excitement. Luke handed her a canteen of water, and she took a sip, still catching her breath. "Thank you," she said softly. "I didn't think I could do it." "You just needed a little trust," Luke replied. "You did the rest." That evening, after dinner, Emily sat by the fire outside the cabin. Luke joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. They watched the stars appear one by one, the air cool and sweet. After a long silence, Emily spoke quietly. "You know, you're the first person who ever made me feel like I wasn't weak." Luke looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her voice. She smiled shyly, her cheeks turning red. "You're the first man I've ever trusted like that." For a moment, Luke didn't say anything. The firelight danced across his face, and then he smiled, a soft, genuine smile. "Then I reckon that means I better take care of that trust," he said. Emily laughed nervously, but the warmth in his tone made her heart calm again. The two sat quietly after that, just watching the fire. Neither of them knew what this feeling was, but both knew it was something real. Over the next few days, Emily and her group waited for the mechanic to come. During that time, she found herself waking up early, just to spend a few moments near the barn. She helped Luke feed the horses, carried buckets of water, and even tried to fix a loose fence post once, though she nearly dropped the hammer twice. Luke would tease her gently, but always helped her up with that same calm kindness. They talked about everything: the life in the city, the peace of the countryside, their dreams, their fears. Emily confessed that city life often felt like running in circles, chasing things that didn't matter. Luke, on the other hand, said his fear was growing old with no one to share sunsets with. Sometimes, when Emily looked at him working, she thought he looked like someone who belonged to another time, a man carved from the land itself. She didn't know why, but she liked that about him. And Luke, though he never said it aloud, found himself waiting for her laughter each morning. Her voice filled the quiet spaces of his ranch, and it felt right, like something that had been missing had finally found its way home. One afternoon, while Emily was helping him brush the horses, their hands brushed accidentally. She froze, her cheeks turning pink. Luke simply smiled and said softly, "Careful now. The horses aren't the only ones who can get shy." Emily looked away, blushing even harder, and Luke laughed quietly. It was a gentle, easy laugh, the kind that made her heart race without scaring her. That night, as the sky turned dark and the stars painted the heavens, Emily couldn't sleep. She stepped outside again, finding Luke leaning against the fence watching the fields. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Always is," he said, not taking his eyes off the horizon. "But tonight maybe a little more than usual." Emily smiled shyly, her heart beating fast. For the first time in her life, she felt safe, truly safe with someone. As the wind whispered through the grass and the night carried the sound of crickets, the two stood side by side, saying nothing. They didn't need to. Something gentle had begun between them, something that didn't need big words or promises, just two hearts quietly finding comfort in each other's presence. And deep down, both of them knew that this meeting, in this quiet corner of the world, would change everything forever. Days turned into weeks, and life at the ranch began to follow a gentle rhythm. Every morning the sun rose over the golden fields, and Emily would already be awake, helping Luke with the chores. What had once felt strange to her, carrying hay, feeding horses, walking barefoot on dusty ground, had now become something she enjoyed. The city felt far away, almost like another life. Luke had grown used to seeing her around too. He had never thought much about having company before, but now, every laugh she shared and every small thing she did left an impression on him. He noticed how she hummed softly while brushing Daisy, his favorite mare, or how she always tried to cook breakfast even though she burnt the eggs every single time. He never said much about it. He just smiled, ate quietly, and said, "Tastes better when someone tries." Emily liked how he made her feel safe, understood, and important. Luke didn't flatter her with fancy words or grand promises. Instead, it was in the little things, the way he held the barn door open, how he offered her his jacket when the air turned cool, or how he made sure her horse always walked beside his when they rode out together. One afternoon they went riding beyond the hills. The land stretched endlessly ahead, the sky glowing bright blue. Emily couldn't stop staring at the beauty around her. "It feels like the world never ends here," she said softly. Luke nodded. "That's the thing about this land," he replied. "It reminds you how small we are and how much there is to love." When they stopped by a stream to rest, Emily sat on a rock, her feet dangling in the water. Luke took off his hat, dipped it into the stream, and poured cool water over his face. For a moment he just looked at her. The sunlight caught her hair and she looked peaceful, like she belonged there. "Emily," he said quietly. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I don't think I've ever met anyone quite like you. She turned, surprised. Like me, what do you mean? He hesitated, rubbing his neck awkwardly. You don't complain. You don't pretend to be someone you're not. You just fit right in, like you were always meant to be here. Emily felt her heart skip. She didn't know what to say, so she smiled shyly and looked away. The wind blew gently, carrying the smell of wildflowers, and for a long time neither of them spoke again. They didn't need to. As the days passed, they grew even closer. Luke taught her how to rope fences, ride faster, and even whistle to call the horses. Emily teased him about his stubbornness, and he teased her about how she always tripped over her own boots. Life felt simple and full, something both of them hadn't realized they were missing. But time, as it always does, began to move faster than they wanted. One morning, a mechanic arrived with a new part for the truck. The sight of it made Emily's heart tighten. The journey she'd forgotten about suddenly stood before her again. Her family was ready to leave. They thanked Luke for his kindness and hospitality. Emily stood quietly beside the truck, her hands gripping her bag. Luke came over, his expression calm but his eyes full of something deeper. So, he said softly, guess it's time. Emily nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Yes, she finally whispered. Time to go back. Luke tried to smile, but it came out faint. Well, you got a city waiting for you. You'll be just fine. She wanted to say something, anything, but her throat tightened. Instead, she took a step closer. Luke, she said, thank you. For everything. For teaching me. For being patient. For making me believe in good people again. Luke tipped his hat slightly, his voice steady. You don't need to thank me. You just take care of yourself out there. Before she could stop herself, Emily reached out and hugged him. It was quick and nervous, but real. You're a good man, Luke, she said softly. Don't stay lonely forever. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. The door to this ranch will always be open, Emily. If you ever need a place to come back to, you'll find me here. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. You've ruined city life for me, cowboy, she whispered. He chuckled, his own eyes glistening. That's a risk I'll take. The truck's engine started, and just like that, she was gone. Luke stood by the fence long after the dust settled, the wind tugging at his shirt. The ranch felt quieter that evening, too quiet. Even the horses seemed to sense something missing. Weeks passed. Then months. Luke went back to his routines. Mending fences, feeding animals, riding across the land, but nothing felt the same. Sometimes he caught himself turning toward the barn, expecting to hear her laughter or her soft voice calling his name, but only the wind answered. Then one morning a letter arrived. It was from Emily. Her handwriting was neat and careful. Dear Luke, I hope you're well. I think about the ranch every day, the sunsets, the horses, and how peaceful everything felt. The city is loud again, and I find myself missing the quiet more than ever. You were right. The quiet really is the best sound. Thank you for showing me that. She wrote about her days, her work, and how nothing felt as meaningful as her time on the ranch. Luke smiled as he read, feeling a warmth in his chest. From that day on, letters became their way of staying close. She wrote about her dreams, her family, and how she was saving up to travel again. Luke wrote about the weather, the animals, and how the ranch was always the same, but never felt quite right without her. He always ended with the same words, forever your cowboy. Winter came, painting the land in shades of white. One morning, while Luke was splitting firewood, he heard the sound of tires crunching on snow. He turned, expecting the mailman. But when the truck stopped at his gate, his breath caught. Emily stepped out, her cheeks pink from the cold. She was wearing a long coat and a scarf, and in her hands was a small suitcase. Luke couldn't move at first. He just stood there, watching her walk toward him with a shy smile. Emily, he finally said, disbelief in his voice. She nodded, her eyes bright. I told everyone I was visiting for a few days, she said softly. But truth is, I came home. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The cold air hung between them, their breaths visible like tiny clouds. Finally, Luke took off his gloves and stepped closer. You sure about this life? He asked quietly. It's not easy. It's rough and lonely sometimes. Emily looked around, the barn, the hills, the open land, and then back at him. I'm sure, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You were my first, Luke. The first person I ever trusted completely. And I want you to be my only. Luke's eyes softened. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his rough, calloused one. Then that's a promise, he said softly. One I'll keep for the rest of my days. Emily smiled, tears in her eyes. You always keep your promises, don't you? Luke nodded slowly. When they matter, yes. That evening they sat by the fire, just like old times. The sound of the wind outside felt different now, not lonely, but full. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder as he handed her a cup of coffee, and for the first time in years, Luke felt complete. Outside, snow began to fall gently across the fields, covering everything in white. The horses snorted softly in the barn, the fire crackled, and two hearts that had once been strangers finally found their forever in that quiet Wyoming night. From then on, the ranch never felt empty again. Emily became part of its rhythm, laughing in the morning, singing while feeding the horses, standing beside Luke when the sun went down. And sometimes when the wind blew softly across the valley, Luke would look at her and whisper with a smile, "Told you the quiet could be a friend." She'd smile back and say, "Only because you're in it," and that's how it stayed, simple, pure and full of love that didn't need big words to prove itself. Because sometimes in the calmest corners of the world, two people meet not by chance, but because their hearts were always meant to find their way home to each other.